Hello everyone, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back with another video here today. And today we are launching our Week 2 Power Rankings, or going into Week 2 Power Rankings. And if you don't know what this is, basically, I rank each of these teams from 1 to 32 based on how well I think they are doing and their power level, stuff like that. And multiple factors goes into it, but mostly it's a week-by-week basis. See the previous video to see what the initial ranking all kind of was, going from the off-season to then. And now we are continuing it once again, going into this season, going game by game, week by week, seeing how well they're doing and kind of moving them up and down. Now, a big disclosure, week 1, 2, and even kind of 3, I do not move teams very much from the initial preseason predictions. The reason for that is, I think there's a lot of things that can happen that really sway people's opinion, like, oh my gosh, the Rams lost this week, they are a bottom 16 team. That's just ridiculous. Even if they play poorly, games happen poorly, some teams take a while to kind of get introduced to the game. Injuries happen, and I don't fully count injuries against the team. I do, to a certain extent, take into account. For example, the Packers were rated pretty highly last week, but due to their loss and their Jordan Love injury, they did go down. Now, I didn't rank them way down like some people on their power rankings would, probably outside of a top 10. Spoiler alert, they're still in the top 10 for me, because I always like seeing how the team develops. A great example from last year is Joe Burrow's injury after the fact. I did knock him down a little bit, but Jake Browning managed to bring the Bengals up a little bit and keep them actually in contention rather than just plummeting them down to 16, basically. So take that into account as we go on throughout this, and I'll kind of reveal things as soon as we start the video. I'll take off my webcam and we'll talk about the entire rankings going from 32 to 1. But you'll get to see the whole rankings. Before we get started though, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment your suggestions for future videos below. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. Now that we got that all the way, all the kind of preface of like, okay, beware. Because a lot of teams also kind of did well, but also lost, or did well, or did not great, but they won. And the teams they beat sometimes, it's kind of a weird factor. So hear me out when I talk about this. I think this is not a too controversial ordering. I think there's a few teams that you could argue, based on me being more conservative with moving people up and down, I kind of play it by ear, okay? So you're probably going to disagree with some of this list, but that's okay. That's what conversations are all about, so let's get right into it. I'm going to reveal it. 3, 2, 1, boom! All right, number 32, we're going to take it one step at a time. All right, 32, the Panthers. Panthers, they are awful. They're god-awful. Easily number 32, not even going to argue it. Raiders, horrible loss. They didn't perform very well. There's not too much to highlight. They go down one spot. Giants, they also go down one spot. Again, not very good performance. Pretty much across the board what we expected from the Giants. Patriots going up too. Obviously, when you beat the Bengals and the other two teams around you do pretty bad, you're going to go up. And actually, I'm pleasantly surprised by at least their defensive capabilities and their run game. So maybe they can actually stay into a couple of the games throughout the season. Maybe even pick up a couple wins here and there. So they go up too. Titans, I don't know what my friends in the group chat were raving about the Titans first half, and all that happened was Tony Pollard did pretty damn good. Will Levis looked horrible. That O-line did not look great. The defense honestly could have done a lot better, but honestly they weren't horrible either. But is that more of a testament to the Bears offense or the Titans defense? A little bit of both, but we'll have to wait and see. They only go down 1 for now, but I just did not like the look of them at all. The Washington Commanders going down 2. Of course, they played the Bucks, so it was a pretty ugly game in that regard. But there's a lot of potential here, so they don't go down a whole lot, but there's still a lot to worry about with the Washington Commanders team. Chargers, a win against the Raiders, an unexpected win in my opinion. They going up 2. The run game looked good. There seemed like there was potential in the receiving game once they maybe get fired on all cylinders for a little bit. Their defense played well. So I think they have a potential to kind of keep on rocking up the rankings as time goes on. Okay, I'm staying conservative, but I think it's pretty safe to put them at least at 26. The Vikings at 25. Their defense really held out the game. Sam Darnold played better than I think some people expected. The run game actually was somewhat together. I think the Vikings overall played a well-documented game, even if it was over the Giants. The Jets staying the same basically. I don't want to count too much for or against them right now. No team around them moved up or down too much for me to think the Jets need to move anywhere. So I think Aaron Rodgers looked fine. I think their run game looked like it had potential. Aaron Rodgers and his receivers seem like they have good connections, but they has to build up a little bit. The defense for the Jets honestly carries me a lot here because I think the receiving game from the 49ers was actually stopped a little bit. And they played one of the best teams and actually kept it somewhat competitive, at least for the first half. So Jets at 24, I'm okay keeping there for now. The Broncos going down 2. Of course, we expected a better start, but of course, Bo Nix has to kind of rank up the gears a little bit. The receivers looked like they were all over the place. Defense didn't do very well. there's a lot not to love, so the Broncos go down 2. Falcons, of course, with a great roster and great capabilities. We saw how Kirk Cousins was moving, and while I'm going to give him another week or two to see what actually pans out, if that's the case, the Falcons may be plummeting off this board quite a bit, so we'll give them some time. But at this rate, the Saints are actually going to be one of the better teams in their division, and that's going to be kind of crazy to see, to be honest with you. So there's still some hope with the Falcons' defense and the run game, but again, we'll have to wait and see. The Saints, I don't like the Saints very much this year, but I think they have to go up 2 because they destroyed the Panthers, division rival. Say what you will, they at least looked like there was some potential there, especially when the Falcons and Broncos didn't look good. I'm going to give the Saints some credibility. The Cardinals, weirdly enough, are definitely easily in the 20 spot. I feel like they fit very well there because their team, I think, function well and actually can beat any team 21 and below, because I think the Cardinals have developed enough to where they actually have a competent football team, but there's still like a lot of weaknesses that they can't really cover up against good teams. Now, granted, they competed very well against the Bills. Kyler Murray looked like he was getting back in the game a little bit more. The defense was fine. The receivers and the connections outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. showed out. So there's a lot to love by the Cardinals team. I still need to wait and see how the rest of the team does, but I think for now the 20 spot is a fair point. The Seahawks, the Jags, and the Bears all stay the same. Kind of all for the same reason. The Seahawks look fine. They look like they did last year pretty much against the Broncos, so not really any reason to move them. Jags played a decent game against a good Dolphins team, and they still look like they need to rank up a couple things, but you could argue maybe the Jags could go below the Seahawks, but I think they all, performance-wise, still stay the same. The Bears stay the same because they end up winning, and their defense and special teams basically did all the fucking work. Their offense was carried through it. They won against the Titans. So none of these 3 teams I justified in my head saying they really moved up any or moved down any, because the Bears maybe moved up a tiny bit because they won and their defense looked amazing, and their offense maybe just needs to get started a little bit more. The Jags played a good team, so it's like, okay, well, they played a good team. They competed well against them, especially defensively. So it's like, okay, we'll keep them about the same. The Seahawks, again, they beat a Broncos team that's, it's impressive to some extent, but it just seemed like that maybe the only change you can make was maybe Seahawks and Jags switching it up. Either way, I like the rankings the way it is at 17, 18, and 19. At 16, we have one of the biggest movers, one of the biggest movers so far, at least 2. Going down 3, the Bengals. When you lose to the Patriots team, despite the Bengals' reputation of them, doing horrible in the first 3 weeks or so, you have to count this against them, at least to some extent. So the Bengals going down 3 is pretty reasonable for me here, especially when other teams in this category are showing a lot of potential to do something pretty nice. Excuse me. The Browns going down 1. Their offense actually did not look great at all, but their defense looked amazing. They played a hard Cowboys team. And again, in this category, it's hard to move people because, again, I look at this top 16 team, or top 16, as a pretty clear, these are potential viable contenders going into the playoffs, or coming into the season. So it's hard for me to say, okay, Browns did horrible 1 week, especially against a good team. Let's give them a little bit more grace. So I've moved them down only 1. The Steelers and the Colts. Steelers played very good, typical Steelers football, and if they keep that up, I think they're going to do 9-8 once again. That's kind of the reasoning. They moved up. They beat a Falcons team, even, in very aggressive, very on-the-ground game. They can win those games, and while I don't feel confident the Steelers can beat maybe top 10 teams very easily, I think they could easily beat bottom 16 teams in a decent matchup. So I'll give them the 13th spot. The Colts, despite a loss, I think deserve a little bit higher than the Browns and Bengals, purely because I think Anthony Richardson looked like he can throw that ball. He looked like he's moving quite a bit, even though I'm worried about that sustainability of his run offense. I think his weapons look good. The defense looked gritty. I like the 14th spot for the Colts right now. 12, 11, and 10, none of this changed for the Bengals, the Miami Dolphins, or the Eagles. The reason that it didn't change was because I pretty much see this top 9 going into the season as kind of the top 9 to expect a lot from. I feel like 10, 11, 12, there was a lot of flaws or a lot of unknown factors when it came to these teams. And while the Bucs defeated the Commanders team and looked good doing it, it's a bad team. So there really wasn't much to move up, especially with the Dolphins and the Eagles also doing similarly good work. The Dolphins beat the Jags team in pretty competitive matchup, but their offense looked amazing. Their defense didn't look much worse than it did last year. So I kind of had to keep them at 11. They kind of moved up the same as the Bucs. And the Eagles, I think, arguably are the team that you probably expect to be higher. Again, this is me not wanting to overreact. I debated on putting the Eagles above at number 8. However, I worry about Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts didn't look amazing in that game. It was pretty much all Saquon Barkley. And while you didn't notice it too much because I think the turf really threw it off, and the score, again, the score was really high, so people really haven't thought about it too much. The defense from the Eagles did not look very good at all. The secondary was getting blown out of proportions. The defensive line was doing all right work. So I'm worried about the balance there. While Saquon was able to put up so many fucking points and do so amazing, there's a lot of unknowns about that Eagles team I'm still worried about, and I don't want to overreact, especially since the Packers were a top 5 team for me on this power ranking. Yes, I know, crazy, they were number 5. But going into the finishing up last season, they looked amazing. Jordan Love showed so much potential. I thought this was going to be a pretty good year for them, and they deserved to be in the spot they did. But they are easily working their ways down. The Packers and Rams are also two teams that are moving on their way down quite a bit. Again, because Packers had both of them had injuries. Puka Nacua and Jordan Love are injured. They both lost against good teams and good gritty matchups. But nevertheless, they both also showed some weakness. I mean, the Packers' offense, despite Jordan Love's injury, was not cooking as much as I thought it would. The Rams, their defense looked a lot worse than I thought it would, and especially their offense didn't look as explosive as it did last year. These are good matchups, but again, between injury, still not impressive games from them, at least in one aspect or another. And again, they're supposed to be competing with these top 10 teams if they're going to be in the top 10. I had to move them down quite a bit. At number 7, the Houston Texans. I mean, come on, it's pretty much blatant that they're going to eventually move up pretty far up. CJ Stroud looks amazing. The run game looked amazing. The defense looked like it, again, at least was the same as last year, if not, maybe a little bit worse, maybe a little bit better. I don't know, depends on how you really look at it. Some time will tell. The Cowboys are the Cowboys. In the regular season, they're going to do well. They're going to be a top 10 team consistently. While the offense wasn't cooking as much, they really didn't need to against a struggling Browns team. They go up 2 slots. Bills +2, again, is one of those teams that's going to do well in their explosive victories. Their offense looked great. Their defense looked gritty. And while I do think the win against Cardinals wasn't great, obviously there's 2 teams that dropped down that helped give the Bills a little boost up. Top 4 teams, there's not going to be much to talk about here. These are a clear top 4 teams for me. Chiefs and 49ers only extend their lead upon the whole rest of the league, staying at 1 and 2 respectively. Chiefs being the Super Bowl champions, of course. And the Lions and Ravens, I think switch spots purely because the Ravens looked like they had a glaring issue at O-line, but it wasn't like I think it's something that can be patched up over time against even worse teams outside the top 5. And then the Lions, of course, looked like they did like pretty much in the middle of last season, kind of fixing up some of their mistakes from before, and beat a Rams team. Despite, again, the Rams team were still a top 10 team. They still won in impressive fashion, so I just went ahead and swapped the Lions and Ravens. Again, some nitpicky stuff, but this is my power rankings going into week 2. So pretty much how you should logic it out is not necessarily as in Chiefs definitely beat the 49ers right now, 49ers beat the Lions, Lions beat the Ravens, or stuff like that. This is kind of like a heat or cold, like a hot and cold chart, basically about how far they're going up and down. So if something happens to like Bears get blown out by the fucking Panthers, 40-10, the Bears won't go, plummet down to 32 all of a sudden. They'll probably plummet down to like 22, 23 type deal. They're not going to go down a whole ton, but they're going to go down quite a bit. Kind of knock them into different categories. And I've gotten more aggressive with this category list because if you went back to last season, I kind of got critiqued for catching on to trends a little bit later than other people. A good example was the Texans. Texans started out like number 31 or 32 in the league for me because they were one of the worst teams the year before. They eventually only worked themselves up to 16, and then the playoffs happened, and of course I ranked them up to 10 or 11, somewhere around that line afterwards. Again, it's really hard at some points to move through some of these teams because, again, you don't know who's trash, who's not, who's still developing, who's not, who's going down, who's going up. There's a lot of work, and I take pride into thinking that I don't just overtly say, okay, the Eagles looked amazing, they're easily a top 5 team again. Because I had worries about them last year. What exactly changed? I don't know. And while we saw one game that did very well in, I just don't want to overexceed my expectations. That is the reasoning for these rankings the way they are. Hope you all did enjoy. I'll see y'all in the next one.